tonight we got a good show. We got Professor Pendark, and he has all types of titles. He's a sideshow performer. Uh, he's a mentalist. He's a writer. He's a magician. He's an artist. He's a stage performer, escape artist. I wonder if he's like Houdini, and fortune teller. And he's involved with some kind of Halloween ball, and he can tell us about that. And skeleton curiosities. So I'm very curious about that. And while we were off the air, they were talking about all kinds of different things. And one of the things I want to tell the professor is I worked with Penn and Teller on Penn and Teller's bullshit, where they flew me down to Mexico on the case of the apocalypse. Was the apocalypse going to happen in 2012? So those guys are crazy and they're fun. But anyway, Professor, I'm going to let you start from the beginning. Tell us how you became who you are.
Okay. Well, it was actually late 70s. I was a fat loner kid. My, average childhood. Didn't get out much, but there was a magician that showed up to our church, of all places. He did a show for our church, and his name was Philip the Great. And he had called me up on stage to help him out with what actually turned out to be one of the very first magic tricks I ever learned how to do. And he said, come on up here. And I'm like, no, I can't. I was a stammering fat kid, right? So he pulls me up on stage, and I did, and had fun with it. And after the show, I very timidly, I said, can I learn what you do, right? And he said, absolutely. Where are your parents? Let me talk to your parents. So he did. He came down, talked to my parents, and he said, I've got a show for the Boy Scouts coming up. I'd love to have a kid come and kind of be my assistant, be the same age as the Boy Scouts. Would it be all right for me to, and he was somebody that was from the church, so my parents knew who he was. And they said, yeah. So he took me along for that show. And ever since then, I kind of been hooked on that. And then I got into doing, in my teens, I got into doing haunted house work. I worked for Rocky Point Haunted House. They were one of the award-winning haunted houses for the longest time back in Utah, and got into doing special effects makeup work and doing some of the set design and character creation for them. And then kind of evolved from there to doing my own shows, where I'm gonna fast forward about 25 years. I ended up here in Texas. I actually started out doing haunted house work when I came here to Texas in 01. Worked for several different haunted houses, and then started into doing my own stage show again. And I've just kind of gradually added some of the other stuff, right? I started adding the mentalism, and I started adding the escapes. And you were asking if I'm anything like Houdini. I'm not going to bullshit you. No, I'm not anything like Houdini, but I'm pretty good at what I do with it.
Good.
I have fun with it, and I have over the last, holy crap, it's been 24 years now, 23 years here in Texas, kind of developed my own style and my own way of doing things. And my regular show for the last 5 years, every month I go out and I do you were just mentioning skeleton curiosities. They are a curiosity shop, one of those little weird, they got everything from like animal bones to tarot cards to they've even got the owner's wife. She has her own line of burlesque lingerie. I mean, like they have a little of everything in this place.
Like Spencer
And
Gifts.
it's a cool little shop.
Like that.
Cool little shop in Waco, Texas. And I've been performing for them. They do a monthly market, and some people say I am the sideshow, but I'm kind of the MC of the sideshow. I end up doing most of the show myself most of the time. not going to get into all that, but yeah, I have fun with it. I have fun with it.
That's fantastic.
So, 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 Professor, how did you pick up like everything that you have in your repertoire now? Did you pick it up at like separate times? What was the bulk of what you know that you can do right now? And also sounds like if you do it every night, you must have, like a really good working knowledge, because you have the people who like maybe have shows every now and then and they
Right.
practice it, but somebody that does it every night, you're doing it like to another level.
Yeah, I do. Well, okay, I don't do it every night, but like several times a week.
I mean,
And
yeah,
I
well,
kind
that's
of
a
go
lot.
out and I
Yeah.
just do, yeah. So I just kind of go out and I do. In answer to your question, I've kind of developed it over the course of working with other people. Like, one of the things I don't screw with, just because I'm a little. You told me that mild language is cool, so I'm just gonna say it. I'm a little chicken shit about the fire thing, right? So I don't screw with the fire too much.
Yeah.
But I do like the bed of nails, the walking on glass. I actually
Okay.
have a balancing act that I do. I come out, one of my character costumes that I do is kind of a wizard character, and I've got a staff. And I come out and I do a whole balancing act, balance that over my head, and I'll actually dangle a knife off the end of it as I balance it. It's yeah. So I've kind of developed my own style of sideshow, right? My own way of doing sideshow. And then the Houdini stuff has kind of evolved out of the last 20 years or so of performing, where I said, and you guys know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like the trick handcuffs and the shackles and all that stuff that, are made to be gotten out of, right? I've kind of evolved past that where I do a thing that I call the you build it straight jacket, where I actually take one of those harnesses and any adult that's ever seen one, they know what it is. It's actually one of those BDSM harnesses, right? With the rings and the stuff. And I actually come out there and I have them build with chains and ropes and stuff, have them build the straight jacket around me with this harness. Because my whole deal is I would rather be I don't want to be a copy of somebody else, right? I want to be my own version of the stuff that I know works. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You got to make it
Absolutely.
your own.
Now,
Yes.
Professor, you talk about being a mentalist. Is that something
Mhm.
like reading someone's thoughts, or
In
exactly what is that?
Okay, so again, the way I explain to my audience is what you usually witness with me is a magician's version of what another person performs. Okay, so for instance, uh, in the case of the mentalism, it's um, some of the kind of stuff you might see on stage. Like you've seen some of the acts on America's Got Talent or that sort of thing, where they do they give you the six choices, and you make your series of choices, and then they end up having predicted what it was you were going to end up on at the end, right? I do several of those kind of acts. But I have also expanded that out into my disclaimer for it is I'm not a pastor, priest, prophet, seer, revelator, guru, or marriage counselor, which is obvious because I've been divorced 4 times.
hmm
But what I am is an old dude that's kind of been around the world a little bit. I've seen some stuff and I like to give advice. So when I'm doing, say, a card reading for somebody, or I'm doing what they call a cold reading, I know you've heard that term before.
Yeah.
A cold reading is where you kind of read the person that's in front of you and their personality and their vibe and what they're giving off, right? And you use that as a means to delve into giving them a piece of advice, right? So this is one of the areas where I've actually caught a lot of flack because I give, say, a John Edwards, he does the talking to the dead on stage thing. I give him a little slack, right? Because he's really doing the same thing that I do, which is you're using a particular belief of someone else to give a piece of advice that's needed in that moment, right? So I cut him a little slack in that regard.
That
A lot
there's
of
a
people say,
there's a
"Oh,
different that you admit that what you're doing is coming from your own knowledge of human experience.
right, right."
He claims to have supernatural powers and the ability to actually communicate with the dead, which,
And there
I
are
mean,
those, yeah, well,
morally speaking, there is some, there's a huge difference.
right.
I don't know. As far as Edwards, it's interesting. I'm like you guys. Anytime I ever saw him, I never got the feeling that he was. It just seemed like, wow, he's being told what the people. He's kind of like what you said. He's kind of going with the people, not like really. But when I read a article of people that were offering different mentalist challenges, Uri
Mhm.
Geller, him, some other people, they said, hey, what's their percentages? And they kept offering him some money for this one gentleman. They said, but you come to my facility. And he said, well, I won't do that. So they kept saying, well, no dice, you won't come. We can't measure how accurate you are. So,
Right.
but what the study was end up saying, they start comparing the accuracy, and he ended up going to his facility. But they said overall, they said they don't know how he did it, but he was more accurate than some of the people that they thought were.
Right.
And I don't know, what the but I got when I saw him, I looked at him different after that study. But before that, I didn't get that feeling of like, but who knows? I don't know what a real psychic looks like anyway. So
Right. And that's one of the explanations that I give in my show, and I'll kind of give you the quick version of it, right? Is my belief that is a great deal of what we call psychic is actually the concentrated use of three very specific faculties in every human being. Okay. And that
okay,
is intuition, empathy, and gut instinct. Okay. And for purposes of my explanation, I'll make it quick. Intuition is your ability to give an answer based on what's going on in a moment, right? In that particular moment, this is the answer that's needed. Empathy, for my purposes, is the ability to feel the emotions of a moment and give an answer that's needed in that moment. And then gut instinct is your ability to give an answer based on your experience and what's gone on before. Okay. So I believe that a great deal of what we call psychic is actually the concentrated use of those three things. And I demonstrate that when I do a reading for somebody,
oh,
because, and this is where I've kind of caught flack from both magicians and those who are into the occult, right? I've caught flack from both sides for this because I combine the two, right? And it freaks people out. They're like, no, you can't be a magician who does the card readings. And why the hell not?
why
Right?
not? It sounds good, man.
Right? Because to me, it's in that moment, it's kind of like when I'm doing one of the shows, and I'm presenting magic, right? A lot of what I do is the old fashioned stuff. Penn and Teller has probably revealed some of it in their old act, right? There have been like the Masked Magician on TV has probably revealed some of the stuff that I do. And there are some people out there that know the methods for the magic that I do, right?
Right.
And that's okay because what I'm finding is the entertainment factor balances that out, right? I'm finding that
Uh,
the I'm coming here to enjoy how this guy does a thing tends to outweigh, oh shit, I know how that was done, right? And the other thing that I find is real fascinating, parents with kids, particularly younger parents with kids, like with toddlers and stuff, even if they look and they know the secret to the thing I'm doing, they will 100% of the time, they will play along just because they want to see the fascination and that look of wonder on that kid's face, right? And that for me is where the performing is at. That's
cool,
it's
cool.
it's the for me the performing is I would rather see that look of wonder and fascination on the face of a kid that is seeing something for the first time and thinks it's the coolest damn thing he's ever seen. I'd rather see that than have the applause of 100 adults. Because the applause of the 100 adults could be obligatory, right? Oh, that was good. That was nice, right? That kid doesn't react that way. That kid is always going to be about the fashion. No, well, now until they reach about 9 years old, and then they know every damn thing, right? after that, after that, you run into that kid. I know how you did that. I'm like, cool. Come on up here and do it yourself. No, I can't do it. Well, then have a nice day. Right?
Ultimately, I mean, we all know it's an act, it's entertainment. That's what we're going there to pay the money for. And I think, the person who really, enjoys it wants to be fooled.
Right.
You that's what you're hoping for. You're hoping to see something that you can't explain that gives you that feeling inside that, maybe there's still magic in this world somewhere. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. And that's why, much to the chagrin of some of my fellow performers, I have actually added in the stuff like, I call it pseudo-psychic, right? I call it sort of psychic, right? Because what I'm doing is I'm actually, like I said, I'm giving a piece of advice based on a medium, and it might be those cards. It might be that crystal ball sitting on the table. It might be me just looking at you directly and reading you, right? But I've added that stuff in because for me, a magician is a one-trick pony, right? Really, honestly, a magician who's just a magician. I'm going to come out here and I'm going to do these magic tricks. I'm going to make all these handkerchiefs appear out of the box. I'm going to make this lady disappear off the table, right? That's it. And you're like, great, that's fine. That's what I came to see. But if somebody can offer you more, right?
Yeah.
Why not? You don't see too many performers anymore. Like the guy that I would compare it to, even though I'm nowhere near as funny, the guy that I would compare it to is Robin Williams, right? Like most comedians come out, they tell jokes, or they come out and they do impressions, or they come out and they do social commentary, right? Or they come out and they do the deadpan playing with the audience, right? This sumbitch did all of it, right? He would go out there and do all of it. He would take comedy to a level that nobody else had done up until that time, right? So while I may not, I already have this huge head, so I try not to let the ego expand it any more than it already is. But while I may not be that guy, right? What I'm trying to be is something more than just a magician, right? Something more than just the guy that walks on glass, something more than just the guy that lays on the bed of nails. Because you can see that all over the place, right? And I feel like the more you can give, the more the audience gets out of it.
How hard is it to take your act out into public? Like 10, 15 years ago, the Chris Angel and the David Blaine, they brought their career and I think magic, into the next maybe phase of it, where they took the act out of the theater. They went out to the street where it seems like it's not a controlled environment, but something tells me it's just got to be a little bit of it.
Yeah,
and control.
Right. And I think what you're getting at, my answer to that is my act is kind of a cross between that and the standard stage stuff, right? Because I'm usually outdoor theater in the round with the markets. And I've kind of taken it to a place where I can come down off of that stage and I can walk around like with the escapes or the bed of nails or whatever. I'll take that bed of nails and I won't even put it on the stage. I'll bring it out way out in front of the stage where people can actually walk around and touch the nails and actually see that it's a real thing, right? And I do that because, like you're saying, they kind of brought it out where you can get out and be right there with the people. And in my experience, that's where the energy is, man. That's where the real joy of performing is, when you can do something right there under somebody's nose, and they may not 100% understand it, but they're looking at that going, well, shit, that's something I couldn't do, right? And you're right there under their nose with it. That's where the energy is. That's where the joy is, I think.
And you see so many YouTube videos where they're exposing these psychics or magicians like Tyler Henry, Teresa Caputo.
Mhm.
They're saying these cold readings and how they show how they do it. And Chris Angel, Phil was talking about Chris Angel and David Blaine. But Chris Angel, there's a video where Chris Angel's ripping into that David guy and exposing him for what he is. And
Yeah.
I worked with Chris Fleming, and that guy is totally, totally fake. I mean, it's just, you know,
Paul,
It's
you bring a good point. You bring up a good point. Which I want to ask, Professor, when you're at a show, how do you deal with like somebody that's watching you do your thing, and then they either want to try to give you advice, try to show you up, heckle, or just get in the way of what you're doing, and you're trying to just have this, yeah.
well, yeah, I haven't run into a situation that was 100% out of my control in that regard.
Okay.
Because usually the crowds that I'm going for are there to see it, right?
I see what you mean.
But
Okay.
but there have been one or two times, and it's usually, I am not gonna lie, it's usually that damn 9-year-old kid, right? He's usually the one. He's
Oh
usually the one
yeah.
that comes
Oh
up
yeah.
there and, I saw this thing, and I know this magician, and how you did that, and it's actually up your sleeve, and I'm standing there with my damn sleeves rolled up, and I'm like, kid, come on, man, right? Those
Yeah, the little
those are the only
kid.
ones. Those are the only ones that I haven't quite learned how to deal with the way I would an adult heckler, right? Because in my day job, which is actually an overnight job, so that I can do my performances in the daytime, I actually work childcare. I work for an orphanage. That's some of what I do on the side, because we all got to pay the damn bills, right? So I do that on the side. I won't talk too much about her because I'm not sure that she wants Pendark necessarily associated with it, but that's my alter ego, my regular job.
So then you have a
And
lot of experience with kids. You should have
so
that.
I
You should have
do,
that kid his number down.
I do in that regard, but I also try to encourage that kid, instead of treating him like a heckler, instead of treating him like, hey, quit being a little bastard, right? Quit being a punk, right? Instead of being that guy, I will turn around and say, that's great. You want to learn how to do it better? I'll teach you how to do it better, right? Because what that does is that diffuses that kid. It diffuses that angry, skeptical, I don't like what you did, because I find that, like, almost 100% of the time, that kid is somebody whose dad bought them a magic kit, and they went through that magic kit, and they decided that all the instructions were too damn complicated, right? And they didn't want to mess with it, and they didn't want to do with it, so they weren't very good at it. So now what they want to do is, well, I read a book and I know how that's done. Well, that's great. You want to learn how to do it the right way? You want to learn how to do it better? And I feel like
Magic is
handling it
hard.
that
I've
better.
been that kid. I've been that kid who looked
Right.
at the kid and said, "Man, this is hard, man. It's like it's not
Right.
easy." Yeah, but sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, and that's kind of, I look at it that way, because every and this is something that I've learned doing the regular job is, and my first experience with kids. This is something kind of interesting. My first major experience with kids, I worked for 8 years in. I was a parent volunteer for what they called the Young Marines, which is kind of similar to the ROTC. If you imagine Boy Scouts with marching and push-ups, right? If you imagine that, that's kind of what the Young Marines was. And I was trained on kids by an old Marine sniper and an old Army Ranger and an old Army medic, right? And their whole thing was, you discipline these kids, right? You bring them to that whole military stance with the kids, right? And I've realized that doesn't work, right? That doesn't work with every kid. And in this day and age, it doesn't work anyway, because you have, I guess there's no PC way to say this. You have a bunch of softer kids now, right? You have kids that they aren't as strong in dealing with criticism or things that they don't understand, or dealing with things that they don't like, right? So you can't deal with them in the same way as you might a military kid. And you have to realize too that we are in a day and age where everybody, there is nobody anymore in this day and age that doesn't have some kind of life trauma, right? You're either that kid from a really poor house, or you're that kid from an abusive parent, or you're that kid from whatever situation happened to you when you were outside the protection of your family. Was that the kind way to put that?
It works.
You have those things in your life, right? There's nobody that doesn't anymore. So why am I going to deal with you on a level that I'm going to get mad because you're heckling me? Because there's a reason that you're being a smartass. There's a reason that you're being jerky to me, right? So I'm not going to turn around and hand it back to you, especially a kid, right?
Yeah, not a
Sorry
not a-
about that
not a
little
kid.
sideline there, but you know,
No worries. I completely agree with you, and it's the you're taking the higher ground, the higher road, and you're making them your ally rather than your adversary. So
right,
it completely
right.
Yeah,
works.
that's a good point, Phil.
You
Yeah.
know, if I had gotten up when I think I was 11. If I had gotten up when I was 11 and I told Philip the Great, I don't know how you did that and you suck, and you know how I wonder how would he have reacted? Would I have learned what I've learned over the years, right? Would I have come from that to learn how to be a stage performer, right? So why am I going to deny that in some kid if that's the direction they're going to go? Which leads, if I can do the shameless plug here for a minute, kind of
Go
leads
for it.
into the new project that I'm headed into. There's a new place that's opening up in Waco, Texas, and it's called the Performing Arts Community Center. And they're actually going to be doing performances as well as classes and clinics. And they've tapped me to do a couple of each in their fall season in November and October. And I'm going to actually go in and I'm going to do a little class on magic and the performing arts and how to present your character as a magician. And I'm actually going to teach a class on that. And I've kind of evolved into the professor moniker, right? I've said, you know, in fact, I'll tell that story real quick. Just I'll tell you this
Go for
story
it.
so
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
tell you,
No, please. You already told us off camera, so you may as
you
well.
know,
You know.
told you this story so I could tell you that one. Um, my professor is an honorary title, right? Pendark comes from a very dark period in my life. Between that time that Philip the Great took interest in me and took interest in that fat little stammering kid and taught him a little bit of stage work, between that time and a failed first marriage, I, um, which I was 19, who the hell's ready to be married at 19? Anyway, not getting into all that. But I was in a period of my life where it was really a dark time in my life. And it was, I mean, I was gun to the forehead, ready to go for it. Right. So Pendark, if you imagine like Pendragon, right, is of the dragon. Pendark is of the dark. He's of that dark period in my life. And what pulled me out of that was actually the producer of the first haunted house I worked for. She gave me a shot. She saw this chubby teenage kid and said, you know what, we do a show every season. You want to come in and check it out? Be one of my actors, right? And I did. And from there, I came out of that dark place, right? And I learned more talents and I learned more skills. And it was my talents and my skills that pulled me out of that dark place. But I held on to Pendark because that's where he's from, right? He's from that dark place. And then professor is an honorary title that was bestowed on me by a particularly drunk patron of one of my shows. I was doing card readings, and she was one of those that was very obviously like John Edwards would have had no trouble with this chick, right? She came in and she was one of those, you know, the low cut blouse and the glitter all over the boobs. And I'm sorry, can I say boobs? Anyway, glitter all over herself. And, you know, the very obvious center of attention type, right? And she came in, and her apparently new boyfriend for the night came in and said, "Hey, here's $20. I want to see you do a card reading for her." I said, "Okay, I'll do it," right? Because what the hell, $20 tip is a $20 tip. So I start doing this card reading, and I get into some stuff. I won't even get into what all it said, but I get into some stuff that apparently she just was not having it. And she slammed her hand down on the cards and said, "Thanks for telling my whole damn life there, professor." And this guy was laughing so hard, and I'm thinking to myself, "Professor, you know what? I'm keeping that." So I did. I kept it. I said, "You know what? I am now Professor Pendark," and that's been on my flyers ever since.
I like
So,
that. Like that.
Great name.
Waco, Texas, right?
yeah, Waco, Texas. Yep.
Okay. And it's so funny because when someone says Waco, the first thing I think of is David Koresh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I think that's some of what the Skellingtons, and I'll be honest, I don't know if that's their real name or not. That's just what I've known them as for 5 years, right? They call themselves the Skellingtons. And I think that's some of what they're trying to do is kind of break that image of the area, right? Because Austin is already saturated with all the musicians, and they have some sideshow stuff and all that going on there already. And I think the Skellingtons' idea is to bring something fun and something new to an area that hasn't seen it before, right? And it seems to have gone really well. It seems to have expanded. And with them, I have run into one or two people that are kind of reminiscent of the old days in Waco, right? Putting this as politely as I know.
Some Branch Davidians still there?
There are a couple there. I actually had somebody come out and protest my show because, you know, there I am with my shirt off, laying on a bed of nails, and having women step over me on a bed of nails, right? And they're just freaking out, right? And the one I took it as a very kind gesture, right? The one was, I had a couple of guys who were I guess they were missionaries, so I don't know what the hell they were doing at this kind of event in the first place, if they were just checking it out, you know, seeing what's there. Actually stopped me and asked me if they could pray for me, right? And I'm cool with all that, right? I'm cool with all that. I'm one of those people, like, you know, if a witch wants to do her thing for me, great. If a Mormon guy wants to pray over me, great. If the Catholic guy wants to do the whole thing, great. I'll take it from whatever source I can get, right? Because I'm hedging my bets. I need whatever help I can get, right? So for me, it's like, I don't treat it as a negative thing, right? I treat it as a co-experience with a human being of a different perspective. Does that make sense?
Did you ever just tell them, "Listen, I learned magic in a church. I
did
literally
once.
started my
I actually
journey
told
in this
them-
direction in a church."
Yeah, I actually told them the story of Philip the Great, and it's funny because, you know, some churches, they just, even the magic tricks, even the thing as simple as vanishing the coin, right? Some churches are just so against that, they think it's just of the devil, right? Because you're
Sorcery.
deceiving people, right?
Yeah.
And I get it. I get it. I do my best to kindly explain that that's not the case, right? And I am, like I said, I've been in projects like with the Young Marines and stuff. I've been in projects where we went down to the coast and we were doing disaster cleanup after one of those last major hurricanes, right? And there were people of every race, creed, color, gender, faith, right? And we were working side by side, and I'm looking at that going, okay, so why isn't it like this all the time? Right? Why aren't we able to do this on everything? Right? Why does it take a freaking earthquake or a hurricane? Why does it take a tsunami? Why does it take a major disaster for us to get off our asses and get out and cooperate and cohabitate and, be human to one another?
We're at our best when things are at their worst. That's that.
Right. And it's unfortunate that that has to be the case, right? So I look at it as, if my experience can give someone else a little insight, and I might be able to learn something from them at the same time, why the hell not? It doesn't matter what the source is, right? And I think that's, we were talking earlier, before we started recording, about politics, and I totally avoid politics in my show, right? I totally avoid
Smart.
politics. I might occasionally bring up a social issue, right? In general terms, but I won't talk politics, because I look at politics as the great divider, right? And you see it all the time down here on Main Street, USA, right? Like in this conversation is an example. The four of us, four very diverse backgrounds, four very diverse personalities, sitting here having a perfectly normal conversation. You can do that on downtown Main Street, anywhere USA, all day long. But you look at the media, you listen to the radio, you listen to what a politician has to say, and suddenly we all hate each other, right? I shouldn't even be on this program because for some reason, I should be angry at one of you for something, for whatever it is, right? According to the media and to the powers that be, as they say, right?
Divide and conquer us. Yep.
Right. And I look at it as, if anything that I do, and maybe that's kind of going back to your question about the diversity of what I do on stage, going back to your question on that is, why would I not bring all those worlds together, right? Because to me, magic, mentalism, now, the thing I don't screw with is hypnotism, okay? I had a very poor experience with that, and I don't want to get too far into details on this, but I had a very poor experience with that, where I was a student of the uh, dark psychology side of it, and I was using what has been referenced in the BDSM world. It's been referenced as sexual hypnosis. Okay. I was using that for a while, and it was, looking back on it, a very poor choice on my part, because I manipulated a couple of people into some situations where I had no business putting them in that situation, right?
Is that like a mental roofie?
Yeah, yeah, in a sense. It begins, well, I'll get into it without telling you all of it, okay?
Okay.
Yeah,
But
nah.
As much as you
it
can.
it begins with something as innocuous as role play, right? You put on a costume, you put on a character, and you play that character in a way where everything in that particular scene is nothing but that character, right? And you can use that psychology in a way that manipulates somebody into, again, trying to use polite terms here, manipulates somebody into performing in ways that they might otherwise not be comfortable with. Was that PC enough? Okay. Um, and it uses the idea of, we are in this character. You have consented to giving me this part of you, and therefore I am going to take this part of you and I am going to make it this thing, right? I am going to manipulate you into only accepting this role, into only accepting, now, not all of, and I've been there too, right? I've been in that world too. Not all of the what they term BDSM, right? Not all of that world is that way, but there is some of it, right? And I got into that dark side of it. Again, that's where Pendark comes from. I was into all the dark, you know, what is the weirdest thing I can possibly be and do, right? I got into all of that, and I look at it now as those choices that people make. There is a light and a dark to everything. Everything has a balance, right? And there are those that have very good, honest, loving relationships within that world, and then there are those that are just out to hurt each other, right? And it's that way with everything, right? Religion is that way. I avoid religion in my shows, right? Because religion is that way. You have, I mean, we can talk about religious leaders who have been convicted of whatever crime, right? But it was from a position of authority over those who believed in that religion for the right reasons. Does that make sense?
Well, that's a cult leader type.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, the manipulation is, I guess, I'm not a hypnotist. I don't know anything about hypnotism, but I'm a student of human nature, and I've seen enough in my short lifespan, 51 years, that, from Jim Jones to, just politicians, there are certain words, there are ways to get people to align with you, to pull them towards your side.
Right.
One of the quickest ways to chase people away is to start insulting them, and that's why I think, like you're leading towards, is that like in a bar, you're not supposed to talk about politics or religion. Why? Because that's where people start fighting.
Right.
So why am I going to alienate half of a potential audience? And all right, so now the liberals aren't going to watch me now, or the Republicans aren't going to watch me now. Just avoid it altogether and entertain people. And
Right.
I think you're going to be more successful. You're going to make people happy, and at least they'll have an hour's worth of entertainment without even thinking about that.
Right. Right. And that's where I try to go. My whole thing is that if I am not, I don't for 1 minute think that I'm the most entertaining guy in the whole world, right? I don't have the ego that says, no, you come to watch me because I am the best thing there is out there, right? Well, that's bullshit. Anybody that says that is lying to you. Okay. Which is where I kind of have, you were talking about like Chris Angel earlier, right?
Mind freak, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of a hang up with that guy. And it's because he's got that, like, his whole
it's all put on.
Like three times.
Let me get the leather jacket with no shirt. Got to show the abs off. Got to throw the eyeliner on.
Right.
But you have him playing that card. Then you have David Blaine, complete stiff, deadpan. And then you've got Gallagher on the other side, or Penn and Teller is a better example, where they're actually out to make you laugh. And I prefer to laugh than the. I think honestly, the only thing good about Chris Angel was that it was so preposterous that it was funny. It was funny to watch him with his freak show in the desert and the Mind Freak song and all that. Hey, Paul, have you got your fan going again?
Oh yeah, oh sorry. Phil, also too, did you see the video where Chris Angel almost got into a fight with David Blaine?
No, I haven't, but it doesn't surprise me because the egos on both of them have to be
No,
ginormous.
it wasn't stage. It was real. Because Chris Angel was one of the judges, and he was making fun of David Blaine's psychic thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. And David Blaine's one of those. I give him a little credit because some of what he does some of the physical side, right? Some of the sideshow stuff. I don't know every one of his secrets, but I know some of his methods, right? He adapts some of the sideshow stuff, like he does the thing with the spitting the fluid and lighting it on fire, and he does a lot of that sideshow stuff that is actually, it's cool and it has its place, right? But there are things that I look at that are just like, I don't want to get into lawsuit territory. I don't need either one of them coming after me because I don't have the money. But I look at some of the stuff they do, and I'm just like, okay, first, that's bullshit. You're in a block of ice, right? That stuff is like, okay, that's bullshit. I love your presentation. You got all this hype and all this stuff going on. I love your presentation. That's cool. But does any part of you ever feel bad about, you're full of shit, right? Does any part of you ever feel bad about that, right? And you look at a Chris Angel and you go, dude, you gotta know with the eyeliner and the hair and you gotta know that you're all persona, right? You gotta know that. And I look at it and I think, well, shit, Professor Pendark's not any different in that regard, right? He's a character that I put on because it's entertaining. It gives me an alter ego, a platform from which to do these things that are actually entertaining, and some of them are dangerous. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I have actually damaged myself in minor ways a couple times on the bed of nails thing, right? You get the scuffs and you get the pokes and you bleed through the shirt a little bit here and there, right?
Those are stunts,
Right.
something more than magic. So I mean, it's real. You're not faking anything when it comes to that. And I think that's what's great about your act, or at least it sounds like it's a combination of everything. You've got the mentalism, you've got legitimate magic, and you've got real stunts. And I think that's a way to you're embracing all of it. You're entertaining, and of course, having a gimmick that goes along with it. I mean, who's going to go watch Terry Bollea? But everybody loves Hulk Hogan. You need to have that larger than life persona. So I mean, I'll give it up to Chris Angel for going there. It was the time period. Exactly. It worked back then. Everybody, it worked for him. It was great in that time period. David Blaine went the complete opposite. I'm the spooky, stiff guy who never talks except like this. I mean, that worked for him too. I think if anybody's got anything to apologize for, it has to be somebody who claims that they can speak with dead relatives. And I'm not going to name a name we may have mentioned before, but you can either bring somebody joy and comfort, or you can really mess somebody up by playing that role.
Oh yeah, and Boy George tore Tyler Henry up on one of the interviews that he did, where he's saying this and saying that, and Boy George's going, "What? What are you talking about?" It's like, wow, being exposed right there on TV.
If you come out and you say this is entertainment, like the Amazing Randy, we talked about him off camera. He comes out and he called it, his documentary was "I'm an Honest Liar." Right. So he told you everything he was going to do was not real, but it's going to entertain you, and it did. Right. That's great. I went home entertained. I got my money's worth. But if you start telling people some things, like, grandma's so proud of you, you should definitely keep doing that. Yeah, if you really take that to heart and believe that, that could be damaging, and I was just got an icky feeling that goes along with it.
I get that. Yeah, I get that, and I kind of skirt that edge a little bit when I do the readings, right? I skirt that edge because what I'm actually doing, like I said, is I'll give a piece of personal advice. Like, one example might be, and this was actually one of the examples that I look back on and say, okay, now I got to be careful about how I do this, right? Is when I was doing my first show of that nature, back in, I think it was 04, 05. I had a young lady that came in and asked me to do a card reading, right? And I was doing the card reading, and it came around to, I won't get into all the details, but it came around to, and you have this thing that you have wanted to do for a very long time that you haven't done yet, but now you have a reason, right? Pursue that thing. And I looked her right in the eye and I said, pursue that thing. And she started to cry. And I wasn't sure why. And she kind of backed up and she said, I will. Right. Well, turns out the older lady that was standing with her was her mother. And after she kind of backed up and walked away, her mother actually handed me one of the largest tips I've ever had in my life, and she said, just last week, she was diagnosed with cancer. And she's been wanting to write her story. And now I think she will. Right. So for me, I couldn't have honestly known that about that girl. Right. But the piece of advice that I gave her in that moment was, whatever it is for you right now, whatever that thing is, do it. Right. The piece of advice was a positive piece of advice based on the most negative thing you can possibly be told in your life. Right.
Absolutely. At the same time, not that I mean, I really apologize for stopping there,
No.
but I just want to clarify and point out, you didn't tell her that this message was coming from a dead relative.
Right, right. That and those are differences. Those are differences.
Yeah,
And
what you did, I
I
think, is perfectly fine. In fact, it's admirable because she got something out of it. She went home feeling great. You had no idea the situation she was in. At the same time, she probably had the best night that she had had in a long time after
right.
that.
And that's and I look on that and that's kind of been that's been my gauge, right? What am I saying to people? Am I entertaining people? Am I giving advice? Or am I bullshitting people for profit? Right. And it's a hard edge to skirt sometimes, because I know that, like, for instance, going back to, say, um, the glass walking or the bed of nails, right? There is never a time when you are 100% free of the possibility of damage from that stuff, because those are actual physical stunts, right?
It's a real thing, yeah.
Right. So, and I look at the advice giving, the card readings, again, I call it pseudo psychic, which annoys the shit out of people, but those routines I look at the same way. I look at them as, I am doing this thing that is here to entertain and enlighten this individual, right? To uplift this individual in this moment. If I do something that I know is out of line to make that profit, then who's the bad guy, right? If I tell you something, if I say, you know, you had a dog that died 5 years ago, right? That's a general in any young adult's life, right? And then I turn around and I tell you some message that supposedly came from that dead dog. What kind of an asshole am I,
Yeah.
right? To try and, instead of that, why am I not just going to take my personal life experience, my personal, who I am and where I've been and what I've done, and just give you a piece of advice, right? And I think that's the difference that we were talking about earlier in these,
Absolutely.
I think that's the difference.
Yeah,
And
you're not doing anything morally wrong.
right,
You're actually, get, like you said, advice, encouragement, if anything at all, right?
right,
You're not telling the kid, you're not telling the kid, drop everything what you're doing and, run to Hollywood and try to be a star or anything crazy like that. But you are saying, if there's something that you've been holding back from doing that you really
right,
want to do it now. Well, isn't that the best piece of advice you could give to anybody?
right. You
Do it
know,
now. There may not be a tomorrow.
right.
No, you're
And
right,
and
Phil. You're right, Phil. And if you look in every cartoon or good, movie or show, there's always this guy that's telling the kid like the right thing with that like shine in his eye, like he sees the potential. He's been there, and you need those people out there that that the kid, when he gets older, he's gonna remember you. They always, most times if they can get back to you, but
right.
it's always that person. That's beautiful.
And that's
Yeah.
and that's the
Good
hope, is
things.
that, something that I do touches people in a way that either entertains, enlightens, amuses, or amazes, right? Those are my four things. If I can do one of those things in your life in that moment for that instant, and that's the only thing you ever take away from, there was this guy, I don't even remember his name. right? But he did this thing and it was so cool, right? That's still me living on in the memory of someone that needed that in that moment.
Absolutely. Hey, when you go on stage, do you like throw on the professor's garb? Are you, shirt and tie, a teacher at Harry Potter's
Okay.
Hogwarts type of style, or is it a top hat? I'm just dying to know, like, how do you
I've gone
carry this out?
I've gone both ways. If you actually go out, I just recently found out, and I should probably get out there and take a bunch of stuff down, but I just recently found out I can actually be Googled. If you go out and just Google Professor Pendark,
Yeah,
um,
I did, and I saw you did it. You've done a few interviews, but I couldn't find any act. Like I just wanted to
right,
see
and
something of what
it's
you
hard,
did.
yeah, it's hard to find any major piece of that. I tend to be in gatherings where I can't quite get that stuff done, if that makes sense. Um, but
And if
I'm
you
gonna get
film it, some people might copy you too. I mean, they might copy, sometimes it's the magic is different in the way like you can show your act, but if it's a way where they could sometimes steal it, I know. But then YouTube, you could have a
Yeah.
channel, but still, I don't know. That's a hard
yeah,
one.
I'm working on it. I'm still kind of old school with the technology, right? So all of this stuff,
Yeah.
the new crap they're doing with videos and stuff now, I'm still learning all that. But in answer to your question about what's my persona, I've actually gone several different ways. I've got one character that's kind of the black cowboy hat, right? Um,
Can't go
I've
wrong with
gone out
that.
there in the whole bright purple wizard's garb thing, right? The whole
Merlin.
Renaissance type costume, right?
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
cool.
I've also gone uh, the whole dark suit and tie thing, right? And tried to be very serious. And it's not my nature to be serious. I'm a smart ass. It's just So I've tried that, and it's a good look for me, but it's not necessarily my image, right? It's not necessarily my attitude. So I don't always stick with that one.
And
Penn and Teller wears. Sorry, Penn and Teller wear suits, and they're hilarious.
Oh
yeah.
yeah. It's it's a give and take thing. I just, I sadly am actually in the best shape that I've been in 30 years. I say sadly because when I was 30, I was still that pudgy teenager, right? At the age of 30 when I came here. And it's taken me to the age of 52 to finally like get myself where I feel good in certain costumes and stuff. So I look at that as okay, either I pick a style or I don't, right? If I just go out there and I'm just whoever in that moment,
Yeah.
I think that's what flows best, right?
Professor, you're talking to a group of people that have alter egos. I mean, there's you, the Professor Pendark. There's me, the Demon Warrior. That's a long story. Phil is El Guapo, and Zandine Smith is the Paranormal Soul Brother. So we all have alter egos, and it's fun to have an alter ego because that's something that you can grab onto, throw it out to the world, and it's crazy.
Right.
It's fun.
Right.
Absolutely.
And usually it's the place where you can do the stuff you wouldn't normally do around the coffee table, right? You
Right.
wouldn't necessarily sit there with people over a cup of coffee and do the same stuff that you would do when you're in front of your little table doing the show, right?
This is the only day
And
of the
I
week I get to wear a cowboy hat. I love it.
right?
Uh,
Hey, I can't wear my mask. You know, by Halloween, I'm going to wear my Demon Warrior mask, and through the whole show, I will be the Demon Warrior.
Well, and
Looking
that's
forward to
nah,
that.
Professor, my
go ahead.
motto is to make them break out the fire insurance anytime you get a chance to. You know, I mean, if you get if and one time, I told these gentlemen before, where I got my mantra, where I got my thing. It was this army. Uh, I don't know if he was a sergeant. I don't know his actual rank. He just came up to me. He and his wife, and I do a lot of blues, but he came up. He said, "Hey, soldier." He said, "Listen." He said, "I've been in 3 wars. I lost a lot of men." He said, "I don't laugh much. I don't dance much. I don't sing much." He said, "But tonight," and his wife, they grabbed me. He said, "You made us do all above," and they were like laughing, crying. I mean, and it was like soul. So that's where I really got the soul thing from. You know, I really like going in there. Or if I see a guy at the bar and he's looking at this blonde or whatever girl he's looking at, he's kind of, and before the night, like I put them together, and he'll be looking at me while they're dancing like that. You know, I'm cool with that. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
but
And that's
whatever you,
where it's
yeah.
at. Right? That's where it's at, is being able to take people out of themselves because you came out of yourself, right? You came out
Ah,
of
that's right.
your, you know, you came out of who, like I said, who you are
I know
around the
you were a fool, but I didn't know you was a damn fool, is what they tell me sometimes. Anyway.
How's the weather over there?
Right now it's still hot. It's been I think I gotta go look. I think it was like 102 today. It's
Whoa.
still hot.
You getting like California, man. It's getting crazy then.
Yeah, weather's been a little rough. It's especially like I'm one of those people. I live part-time in my car, right? Where I'm traveling when I can, and I there is no way I am going to try and sleep in my car in the summertime in Texas. It's not going to happen.
When I was stationed in Fort Hood, Texas, I was living in Killeen, and my son right now lives in Big Springs, Texas.
Big Springs is nice. It's a nice area. I've been through there. I haven't been there much, but I've been through there. Killeen, I used to travel to a lot, like with the Young Marines and stuff. That's one of those real quiet areas that like you wouldn't expect. You know, you get down there and there's like barely any traffic. There's, you know, where is everybody in this town, right? And then
like
you get somewhere like between anywhere now is like the whole metro area, anywhere between say Austin and Waco, right? Is all like you can't go anywhere without major traffic. You can't go anywhere without thousands of people being in the same place you're at, right? And I'm not sure which I like more. I'm not sure which I prefer, right? Because you know what was the line from Dracula? I love to be among the whirl and rush of humanity, right? But at the same time, there are times when, you know, we talked about the intuition and the empathy and the gut instinct, right? There are times when I get out amongst people and I feel like total overload, right? I've been ADHD all my life. So I'm one of those people that like I get out there and it's not a thing I seek out, but every once in a while I'll get out there amongst a crowd of people, say at a grocery store or something, and I'll just start to get that whole spectrum overstimulation thing going on, and I just got to get the hell away from people, right? Which is why I think that's the other place that Pendark comes from, is he's my guy that can deal with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you've got a split personality almost. You got your introvert, and then you want to be on stage too, where you're the center of attention and entertaining people.
Right.
And to put it another way is, if in a small town is a nice place to be, but it's easier to fill an auditorium and do a show in a bigger place, right?
Right.
Because that's where the people are at.
Well, and not just that, it's because when I'm behind that table or when I'm on that square of the stage, right? That's my zone. I am in control of that zone. I am in control of my world, right? So if I come down the stairs and I grab you out of the audience and I invite you into my world, I am in control of the energy that's about to happen there, because I am inviting you into my world to do the thing that I do, right? Whereas the introvert comes in when I get out in public and I'm in some grocery store and this dude over here is screaming and yelling about the prices, and this chick over here is arguing with the teller about the coupons in her hand, and the teller's mad because she hasn't been to lunch yet, and whatever it is, there's all this stuff that I am constantly observing around me, and it tends to overload, right? So I honestly, when I'm not on stage or I'm not in that controlled environment of my overnight job, I don't I don't do a whole lot of public, right? I put it that way because that's what it is. I don't do the public, right? It's just not my constant thing. For a lot of people, it is. It's what they enjoy. It's what they do. But for me, it tends to be an overload if I'm not in control of my environment. Does that make sense?
100%. I'm the same exact way. I live in a small town. I don't like big crowds. I grew up an hour out of New York City, and I hated New York City. I never felt like I was alone inside a city, and I didn't like that. I like my downtime and alone time. At the same time, I've been on stage before, whether it's playing music or getting an award for one of the documentary films I did, and there's a high to that, almost like an alcohol or a drug type high that comes from that feeling,
Right.
which is a good feeling. But it's nice when you know that it's going to end. All right, I've got this much time, then I'm out of here, and then I can recharge and I'm back to my comfort zone.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I
And
totally empathize there.
And I think that's where I have finally worked myself into a situation where I'm lucky in that regard, because my regular job is working into where I do the 4 10-hour shifts at the beginning of the week, right? So that I have the end of the week to go do my shows and do my other stuff. And I won't, like I said, I won't get too far into it, but my employer has been real gracious about all that. She's like, no, you're the only one that put up with the overnight shift and is doing what we need to have done for the overnight shift. So we're going to work with you as much as possible, right? So I'm in a real gracious situation in terms of that. So that's one thing I count myself lucky, where I'm able to divide the two worlds in one half of the week and then the other half of the week, right? And I can take that and I know that, okay, if I have a show on Sunday and I got to be at the overnight shift Sunday night, I have a show Sunday afternoon, I know that I'm going to take that time and I'm going to wind down. I'm going to bring myself back down from, like you said, that high, that zone, right? I'm going to come back out of that zone and I'm going to bring myself back down to where I can do what I need to do in my service job, right?
Recharge.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm also lucky in the regards that it's a job where, I'm not digging ditches, and I'm not toting packages, and I'm not doing all of the stuff that would otherwise keep me from being able to have that little bit of downtime with a cup of coffee between making my rounds, that kind of thing. So I'm lucky in the regard that I get that ability to recharge and to regroup and to bring myself back between I really view it as two worlds, right?
It is.
And anybody who's ever been on stage for any period of time knows it is two worlds, right? You're up there and you are in this giant inferno of everyone's energy in that moment. And then you got to go back to being husband, dad, right? Whatever your job is on the side, right? You got to go back to doing that. And it's not always an easy thing. Some people have a real hard time with that transition. Like I said, I'm lucky enough to be able to have had a situation where I can manage it. So I've learned how to manage it.
It's amazing to be on stage and feed off all the audience energy. I mean, it's a great feeling. I mean, it really puts you up on a cloud nine. Yeah.
It's a drug.
It is. And I try to be real careful about that because,
how it consumes.
Yeah, you've all been around it. You know that at any time it can also be snatched away from you, right?
No,
At any time it can be grabbed away from you and handed to somebody else. So just like a drug, just like that high that you get on emotionally, you don't want to become dependent on it, but you want to ride it for as long as it's there, right?
I think too much of it too can twist you and warp you as far as the reality goes, because
Right.
I've had it in very brief spurts, and being the most popular guy in the room, even for a little while, and everybody wanting a piece of you, asking you a question, or they're sincerely interested in what you just did or what you're doing. It's a high. It makes you feel really good.
Right.
If you're super successful, like, one of these entertainers, movie stars, musicians out there, and your life is like that every day,
Yeah.
I have
I
to
can,
think that that probably is damaging in a way, because I mean, maybe
I would
that's why, like Leonard Cohen went and became a monk for a long time,
right.
just to get away from people, because it's, yeah, it can be too much, like a drug overdose, I guess.
Right. Or that's where you hear these stories of, your Quentin Tarantino's or these other people, they got all this weird little secret shit that they do on the side, right? Because they got to do something to get out of this mold,
Like
right?
Puff Daddy or Jeffrey Epstein, they'd start doing some real twisted shit on the side.
There's all kinds of stuff where you look at that and you're going, okay, psychologically, okay, again, because I've seen the dark psychology side of it, right? Psychologically, I can see why that happens to somebody. So the more I can do to avoid that in myself, right? The more I can do to, and I think that's where I've always tried to be of service to other people in the rest of my life. Does that make sense? Is if I become this big ego ridden son of a bitch who just thinks that I'm just going to say it like it is because I've met some people here in the Austin area, right? Because I'm a magician and I do this big Las Vegas box magic stuff, I just think I'm the king shit, and that there's nobody as good as me, and nobody, and you're not, you don't even belong in my zone because this is who I am, and this is, I am this bigger person than
You
anybody else because of what
you
I
lose
do.
humility, and then you
Right.
lose your humanity as a result.
Right. And I think that's where I have always tried to balance it with always being in some way of service to other people. And in particular, in my case, because I was that fat, lonely, stammering kid that some magician took interest in, right? I think in particular for me, being in some kind of service to kids and helping them become who they are and grow into who they're going to be, right, takes me out of this zone where I could become this drug-addled, ego-ridden
It grounds
asshole,
you. Yeah, it
right?
grounds you. It brings
You
you
got a purpose, man.
back to earth.
Right.
And
Exactly.
you
You got
got
a
all these
calling.
people now, and you got all these people doing TikTok and everything else. Everybody is seeking fame. Everybody. And
Right.
they get all, and everybody, like, especially the young crowd. Oh, I got so many hits. I hear it from my neighbor's kid. He does some dancing on TikTok, and he goes, "Oh my God, I got so many hits." I go, "Wow," it's like
Well,
everybody's seeking it.
right. And for me, it's like I get it, right? Because I've had a taste of it. I get it. I understand why you would want that. But at the same time, you know, I get out and I do these shows, and I've done some, just goofy weird shit just to do it for, the TikTok or the Facebook or the whatever, right? And I get out there and I do this stuff, but I don't gauge my whole, you
Worth.
know, yeah, my whole worth is not how many hundred people clicked on my thing today, right? And if you're basing yourself on that and then it stops happening, right? It's just like the stage stuff,
I
Oh
think
yeah.
right?
that's what's dangerous about kids coming up these days, is that, you had a chance to become an adult, and early pain grounded you, and what you do for, as your day job or your night job, that grounds you as well. You've got the worldly experience to handle it, whereas a 15-year-old is not going to be able to handle it.
Right. And
Um,
I look at that and I see the danger of it. Like, and this is one area where I guess I must have done something right with the marriages and whatever. My He's 19 now, and he's working for a utility company. You know, he's my exact opposite, right? It's that old Monty Python skit, right? The father who was the writer who was upset because he didn't write his fingers to the bone for his son to become a bloody laborer, right? But my son, in the same regard, right? He's working for a utility company. He's making about $5 more an hour than I do. You know, hint, hint, boss. But he's out there and he's really starting to make a life for himself. And I look at him and I think, okay, so what's different between him and say this 19-year-old kid over here who's still living in mom's basement and, you know, can't process life on a level where they're not constantly, for lack of a PC term, butthurt over something, right? What's the difference between him and this kid? Where is it, right? And part of my ego wants to go, okay, it was me, right? But then I look at it and I go, no, there are levels in every part of society, right? Because I know 52-year-olds that don't have their shit together. Let's just be honest, right? I know, like, I could walk down the street from where I'm at right now. I could walk down the street to the bar, and I could walk into 8 or 10 different 50-plus-year-olds who are there for what? They're there to get drunk, get high, get laid, whatever, right? Sorry if that was over the top with the language, but you know,
Arrested
you look at
Development.
that, it's like, okay, so what's the difference between me and them? Well, the difference is focus. The difference is I've had to force myself with the ADHD to learn to focus on me and not let everything out here be who I am, right? And I think that's the difference, is you let your environment be who you are, and that's what you're seeing with these kids, right? If I don't get the clicks, if I don't get the likes, or you know, one of the disturbing things that I'm seeing is these kids that are filming each other beating the hell out of each other in school, right?
Yeah,
You
that
know,
is disturbing.
that disturbs me because what that means is I am now taking to violence in order to become something, to be something, to have people see me. I'm now turning to violence, right? So I don't know. I could get into a whole conversation about
Yeah.
why I think that is, but
Yeah, we could do a whole nother hour on that at least. But we can't solve the woes of the world. And
yeah.
we've gone over a bit. I really do appreciate you joining us. It was great talking to you. We've gotten more than an hour of your time, almost hour and a half now. And
Well, I hope you got it. I hope we got enough to work with. Edit
more
out
more
too.
than enough. But yeah, interesting guy. It was great meeting you. I truly appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing
Enjoyed it.
your world and what you do with us. And I'll let the other guys thank you now too. I'll shut up.
No, man, you worked magic and we didn't even have to see a trick.
Oh yeah.
All right. Next time, I'll tell you what. Invite me back another time, and I'll actually come and perform some stuff for you.
Got to, man. We got
Oh,
to.
that would be great.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Wonderful interview. Thank you very much, our professor. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right, everybody. Have a great night.
All right, Phil. All right, Paul.
Right.
Later,
night,
Andy, and later, Paul. Great
Take
meeting you, Professor.
care.
Have a good one.
That was all right.